Los Andes Copper is the owner of Vizcachitas. It's a single asset company, owner of one of the 3 or 4 largest greenfield copper projects in the world. We today have over 13 billion pounds of copper in the ground in measured and indicated, which actually puts us in that very rare space of projects that can start making some difference. We put out a PEA back in 2019, which at a $3.5 copper was showing an NAV after tax of 2.7 billion US. Effectively, what that means is today we're trading at 10% of NAV, and that's where the opportunity lies. Our peers are today trading between 0.3 and 0.4 times, so there's a quick pickup of upside in the re-rating we're actually doing right now, and I'll get into a little bit why we're actually in the process of doing this and why we're coming from a lower valuation. The resource is 100% owned by us, so this is something that for the majors is key, so they can actually get a hold of all of the asset without having partners or strategic or joint ventures that can get on the way. We have a number of drilling that we've done recently, which actually shows that we have large intercepts that have been not closed off and shows the possibility for significant further expansion. We're finishing up a pre-feasibility study, which we expect to have ready by next quarter. No need to get into copper and the deficit. Only thing to point out is 100,000 ton copper operations are not that many out there. We need 85 of those to cover the deficit. Or said in another way, when you look at ourselves, SolGold, Solaris, Filo, Josemaria, and the handful of greenfield projects out there, you need to build all of them, and you need to go find another 50 of those to bridge the gap from here to 2030. It's not going to happen. But anyway, that puts us in a pretty nice position to be in right now. No need to get into copper again. As it relates to us, we are located in the central belt of Chile, which is actually the house of 3 or 4 of the largest copper mines in the world. I'll get that into a little bit. We have competitive grades, and we have excellent infrastructure, and that actually makes a very compelling economics package for development. The PA shows a 45-year mine life, plus some additional resources that don't get mined. Said in another way, this is a generational asset, particularly because it's open in different directions. We don't have any strategic entanglements. We don't have that 10% owned by any of the majors, which is very helpful in sort of promoting or marketing the company early on. But when you want to actually negotiate an asset like this, it creates a bit of the stalking horse syndrome for the rest, so we're clear of that. On the offtake side, we also don't have any entanglement, which is the other side that big companies want to be able to dispose of all the concentrate, particularly clean concentrates, which is what we have, very low arsenics. Our biggest challenge is starting to build liquidity. We were essentially run as a private company for a decade, and we've started recently to become a proper public company, and we're doing some changes and working on that. From our share capitals, we are a company with 27 million shares outstanding, which in a nutshell says from an NAV basis, we're worth $100 US per share, and we're trading at 14 bucks. Okay. This is a tightly held company. Turnberg Mining owns 53% of the company, and we have some institutional investors at the Turnberg Mining level and also at the Los Andes level. And part of the work we've been doing over the last 18 months is expanding the institutional base, bringing in new names. Lansdowne Partners from London, they came in about 18 months ago, and we've probably bringing 6 or 7 names from Canada, from London, from continental Europe, and from the US to start building this base of institutional investors that can help start building the liquidity as they come in. Going back to where we're located, Vizcachitas, it's in the central belt. North of us, 70 kilometers, you have Pelambres. Pelambres is the flagship operation of Antofagasta Minerals. It's what made Antofagasta. South of us, you have Rio Blanco, Los Bronces. Those are 2 mines on the same deposit. Rio Blanco is a Codelco subsidiary. It is the largest resource that Codelco has. Not the biggest mine, but it's the largest resource they have. Los Bronces is one of the two flagship operations of Anglo American and Glencore working together in Chile. They have Collahuasi and Los Bronces. And then Teniente, further south, is Codelco as well. It's the largest underground copper mine in the world. Now, if you look at where our numbers stand, we're obviously much, much smaller than they are, and that's a function of having 60,000 meters of drilling only. I mean, a project like us should have 200,000 to 300,000 meters of drilling. We've only drilled out 60,000, and it's open in every direction. In terms of land package, we have a significant land package with Vizcachitas itself and some other alterations, and we're surrounded by all the big guys. In terms of infrastructure, that's one of the big advantages we have. First of all, we're at 1,900 meters. That, to begin with, it allows us to develop a mine without having to derate equipment for high altitude or particularly adverse weather conditions. And also, because of the proximity to the valley, where there's people and infrastructure available, we don't need to build a camp. So that makes the development of this project much simpler and much cheaper, not only to build it, but then to operate it. We are 60 kilometers away from power station. There's another 2 or 3 power stations around that could be between 80 and 100 kilometers away. There's a railway line that actually goes 60 kilometers away from the mine, so we all need to improve a road to that railway and then access that railway that will take us to any of the 3 ports. In terms of water, we have 500 liters per second of continental water rights, which are located about 100 kilometers away from our mine. And on the changes we've done in the PFS, our water consumption is coming down to around 250 liters per second. In addition to that, and that's sort of as a result of where mining is going in the future and the need for social licensing, we have joined the Desalinated Water Consortium, where we will represent about 25% of the desal water production. So that effectively says we have 4 times the water we need, and we're migrating into desal water, which is, I guess, right now a necessity to develop these projects. Just to skip here, in terms of the base case PEA economics, our mill capacity is 110,000 tons per day, and the PFS, we've been doing some debottlenecking work, particularly on the primary crushing side of the project, and that's going to allow us to probably increase that throughput a little bit. In terms of the economics, even if you run it at back then $3 copper, which was the base case, we're still looking at a 1.8 billion NPV for a 1.9 billion capex. In terms of cost, we're sort of in the second quartile. So the elements for this project are actually in the middle of the field for what the new greenfield projects are looking for. Maybe the one element to highlight here is that little message on the corner. Every 15 cents an increase in copper price adds 300 million to the NAV. So if you want to put in a $5 copper, we can all be very, very happy. In terms of the PFS work we've done recently, the 2 biggest changes are that we moved from SAG mills into HPGRs. That has a big impact on power consumption and on creating better microfractures for the flotation circuit that goes afterwards. And then we also moved to dry stack to filter tailings. That's something that we've obviously done all the pilot work and the test work attached to that. That makes a big difference. That brings down water consumption to half, and it also reduces the footprint as we're able to layer cake the filtered tailings together with the waste. That's, again, one of the big changes, and here Mother Nature's gave us a little hand. The real reason we can do that is because the project doesn't have any clays, and that's what actually allows for this to filter very nicely. I mean, BHP can throw billions to try to filter Escondida, and they just won't be able to do it. In terms of drilling and outside potential, we've been doing some drilling this year to show how this deposit is open in many directions. Here we're looking at, towards the east, a hole that now is standing on its own, and it's actually over 300 meters of 0.6 on the bottom and 800 meters of 0.4 overall. This is just to illustrate how this deposit is only growing. And to put it bluntly, it's not that we don't know where the borders of it are, we still don't know where the center of it is. And that's a very interesting discussion with some of the big companies. On the western side, we have the same phenomenon, particularly on the deeper side, that we're seeing how below the open pit there is a substantial underground deposit. We had some nice intersections on the south, which give us 150 meters of 1%, which improved the economics on the early years. On the community side, which obviously it's key, we've been doing the work. Santiago Montt, who now is the new CEO, he comes from this world, from the world of permitting, corporate affairs, regulations. He was at BHP for over a decade, actually dealing with all these issues for the operation in Chile, Brazil, and the US. So this is actually his forte. And this is critical as we want to make sure that all the work we're doing here is an asset of the project and not something that any major that takes over the project to build it has to catch up with. Over 140 meetings, all the discipline for the reporting and the subsequent due diligence for all this has been properly done. Permitting in Chile. Chile is a mining jurisdiction. It has its issues, as all jurisdictions, in terms of permitting and delays and headaches. But this is a project. I mean, Chile has already made a statement that they need mining. If you look at the discussions on the new royalty, they've all migrated to make sure that mining is comfortable and they can attract new investment. So aside from the normal headaches that we all need to suffer, we are on a good path for advancing the project. There's no red flags. We don't have any of the big issues that some of the projects need to deal with. In terms of timing, we are actually right now completing the pre-feasibility, which should be done, again, first quarter of next year. Then comes the feasibility study, 23, 24, and the next phases. And while I can talk about the later phases, given what's going on the strategic side, the likelihood of this project being around independent way past the pre-feasibility is very slim. This is the team. I spoke a little bit about Santiago. He comes from BHP. The technical team is a well-seasoned team. Manuel Mata, who's been working with us for a number of years, he was actually involved in the development and the construction of several of these Tier 1 copper projects, and that's been key. He, together with Fernando Porchile, who sadly passed away a couple months ago, worked together in the design of Antamina, Cerro Colorado, Spence, the expansion of Collahuasi. In Codelco, they were involved in some of the critical projects. Manuel himself was actually running Glencore's smelter for a while. So these are people who've been in Tier 1 copper all their lives, and they can really relate to how to put a project together, particularly when you need to have the discussions with the majors. In terms of the board, one of the things we've done, we were, as I mentioned earlier, essentially a private company with a listing for a very long time, and that actually impacted in us having virtually no liquidity and no market cap. We made a decision 2 years ago to become a proper public company. We started by restructuring the board. We brought in Corinne Boone. She's from here, from Canada. She's been a very senior and experienced person from the ESG world. She participated in several centers and boards, and she worked in the development of the ESG platform for Hatch. She's been very instrumental in helping us readjust our ESG work and put the discipline in so that we can actually advance on that front the way not only the market but all the majors expect us to do. Later on, Warren Gilman came, and Warren obviously has been a heavyweight in the markets in mining for decades. Maybe just skipping a little bit to where we are. This is this is a verified presentation that's supposed to be interactive 3D, and I can sort of move around and brag about the deposit, but on a static version, this is our property. And if you look at where we are in the valley, you can start seeing where the forests of drill holes are located. And if we go to the next one, you can see here how we have a number of holes or intercepts that are not closed out, and that's a reflection part of how much this deposit can grow. If we look at sort of the rock types, if any of the geos that go and look at these, there's no difference between our development and what you see in Los Bronces or in Teniente. These are sort of, I'll try to do it efficiently. This is sort of our 0.5 and above volume. And if we overlay that to what we have as in the phase 1 pit for the PEA, you can see a couple of things. First is because we're in a valley, the project does have some significant wings to the side. These are not a significant volume or tonnage of pre-strip, but it's time. I mean, being able to develop those takes time, and that's what we're working on right now. If you look at the final pit, obviously same situation. One other interesting thing is because we haven't closed out our drill holes, we're right now actually doing exploration within our pit, which is not that common. So we're expanding our resource, and some of the material that was classified as waste in the PEA because of further drilling now becomes ore on a PFS. Also, if you look at this from the underground, you can see that there's substantial mineralization, high-grade mineralization, that's very unlikely it's going to get picked up by an open pit. And this is key because all these porphyries have a higher grade underground potential, which is being developed. If we go back to the list of the 4 projects that I mentioned earlier in this area, Teniente is the largest underground copper mine in the world, and just to make their tonnage to the mill, they complement the underground with some open pit. Andina has always been an underground mine. They also complement their feed to the mill with some open pit. Los Bronces is an open pit operation. Their expansion is just to go into their underground they have. Pelambres, which is today an open pit, they're already working on their underground to migrate from the open pit to the underground in the next few years. In our case, what we want to do is make sure we can illuminate that we have an underground compelling case under the open pit. The PFS will not be able to capture the economics of that. That requires a lot more drilling, but we want to have enough, and we have enough drilling to show that the way this deposit performs is no different than what the other deposits have. I mean, these are the new drill holes we did this year. Interestingly, this hole 1, it's over 1 kilometer of continuous mineralization. That's actually quite rare to come across, and I think we made it to a list that the Mining Journal put together for these over kilometer intercepts. Most interesting, you have the bottom of these holes show this big underground potential. You have hole 11. There's more holes that reflect the same. And here, just to highlight a bit more what we have as potential, let me just go back here. If you look at this figure here of the current mineralization, we have this gray unmineralized diatreme, which is this later event. This is actually, if you look at Teniente has the Braden pipe, which is exactly the same. Los Bronces has a similar one. And what happens is that these later events displace the copper and create the better grades around it. In our case, if you look, most of the mineralization was located west of it just because of the valley, of the position of the valley, and because historically, it didn't make any sense to try to look for mineralization on the eastern side of the diatreme, because if you would try to push back this wall, it's virtually impossible, so you can't really get to that mineralization. But now that you're looking at an underground case, it's a completely different story, and we're able to show very nice grades, continuous grades, with boronite and improving conditions going down on the eastern side. So obviously, going back to drilling, which we expect over the next 2-3 months, giving volume and being able to show how this underground deposit evolves is one of the key things to show that we don't only have the Vizcachitas that's been around forever, but there's a much bigger thing underneath. To finish up, in terms of the infrastructure, in the PEA, we actually were intervening 2 valleys, and that's because we had thickened tailings. By moving into filtered tailings, we're able to condense everything on one valley. In fact, the tailings deposit you have here is for the first several years. They'll probably extend a bit further south. And aside from that, the only other big CapEx item is a river diversion tunnel that we have to build, which is about 11 kilometers. It's an expensive item, but it's nothing particularly complicated. Quellaveco has one, Pelambres has one, and both Andina and Los Bronces have shorter tunnels. So it's something that's been done, not particularly complicated, but it's an expensive investment that we need to put there.